All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope we all had a good lunch. It was good?
Yes.
Tasty?
Delightful.
Yeah? Dreadful. Oh, delightful, sorry. That's good. I was going to say, any feedback? I didn't make it, it's all right. So I'm the head of email and cloud testing here at SE Labs, and the presentation is going to be about our new scam test that we've been developing. It's about addressing the modern consumer need. So first I'll just go through the content. So firstly, why create a scam test? What is a scam? We'll go through the definitions. What platforms are under test? I'll do a breakdown of the scenarios that we've created for it. I'll go a brief look into the pilot that we ran earlier in the year, what we learned from the pilot and the feedback, and then future of scam testing, and then we'll have a little Q&A at the end where we can discuss it. So firstly, why create a scam test? The main reasons for creating a scam test are because we want to. But actually, scams are extremely common. So I'm sure we've all had a family member who's had a successful scam or an unsuccessful scam levied against them. The Citizens Advice Bureau confirmed that 7 million UK adults have been affected by scams in 2025. Obviously, have to talk about AI. It's everywhere. Unfortunately, AI makes scams a lot easier to run. The bar for entry is much lower than it ever has been. I think before we could always say, oh, the language is kind of bad in this email. It's unlikely to be my mum or unlikely to be Elon Musk. Now, obviously, language isn't really a factor because the AI will kind of do that for you. So obviously, with all of these in mind, the need for consumer anti-scam products is rising. Another very important thing with scams is they're very hard to spot. Often they don't have an initial malicious element to them. Obviously, they use social engineering to kind of get that trust and to get something out of you. So unlike when you send a phishing link to someone, a lot of products can just go, okay, that's not directing where it's supposed to be, we'll block that. They will try and talk to you and try and get you to give that information freely. And they can also be carried out over a very long period of time, depending on how valued the person, the attacker, thinks the victim is. Oh, don't know why I didn't go next then. Oh, sorry about that. Scams are always evolving. Like we all know, malicious actors are always going to find new methods that you hadn't thought of. And as I mentioned previously with AI, obviously it's very easy to make a kind of jailbroken LLM designed for this specific purpose. And obviously new tools are being created every single day. I mean, looking at how far things like deepfake have come now, it's mental how fast it's evolving. And as we all know, we can only really be reactive in this industry. Obviously, we do try and think like hackers, but they're always going to do things that you don't expect, and that's what the test is for. So, obviously, we need to discuss what actually is a scam and what constitutes a scam. Scam is a message that uses deception to impersonate a legitimate person, brand, or authority, and it is designed to induce the recipient to take an action that benefits the sender at the recipient's expense. The action typically involves either transferring money or value, disclosing sensitive information, installing or executing software, or visiting a resource controlled by the attacker that facilitates those same outcomes. So, common platforms. Scams are often delivered to members of the public over these channels. So obviously a big one is email, SMS, MMS, so iOS and Android, consumer instant messaging apps like WhatsApp, iMessage, Facebook Messenger, Telegram, Signal, and then another one is social media. However, platforms we're currently testing, within the pilot, are SMS, MMS, specifically Android, and email. We did find that as we all know, with Apple, sort of API access and integration can be a bit difficult, and we wanted to make sure that we have full access to what we're trying to test here, especially when it comes to stuff like log collection and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the samples. With the threats over SMS and MMS, obviously are specified over Android, we have 100 samples. For email, it's 100 samples to create a total of 200. Obviously, as the test evolves and adapts over time, the distribution will change kind of based on how many platforms we're testing. But generally, it will be a split of the 200 samples. For FPs, obviously, you have to run FPs just to make sure people aren't kind of stopping anything that comes through. SMS and MMS is 60 samples, email 60 samples for a total of 120. Again, same thing. If we're adding more platforms, it will kind of be distributed over those. So this is the breakdown of the scenario types we're using at the moment. Again, obviously it's an evolving test, so it is subject to kind of change. But the values we've gone for so far are 40% requests to move platform. So this would be your samples where the person is like, oh, if you want crypto, call me on this number or email me here. 30% would be payment links, so obviously fake PayPal links, etc. 20% will be your phishing links, so obviously we all know phishing. 10% will just be personal information harvesting, so just kind of text-based. So that'll be more someone specifically asking for login credentials and things like that. The sample distribution, so we've kind of distributed our samples based on how long of a thread each of these scam samples are. So we have 45% are kind of first message attacks. So that's someone straight away being like, hey, can you send me £5,000 for whatever? Then we have slightly longer. So you have your two-part threads where obviously there's a little bit of rapport building and then they ask and then so on and so forth. We did find that more scams are kind of your first message ones because obviously it's easy to run. They can send it to thousands of people and then once they have a hook, obviously that's when they can continue. In terms of the types of senders, we've gone for a kind of varied list. So we tried to think of like what's something that a regular sort of consumer would have on their phone. What are kind of standard, say, attackers. Obviously, a big one is just family impersonation. I mean, my mum got a text the other day saying that I'd been in an accident and I need to send her £500. Thankfully, because I work here, I've let her know not to send the attacker the extra money and stuff like that. So family impersonation is extremely prevalent. And then your things like your bank, energy service, NHS, Amazon, and so on. We find these are some of the most common ones that people encounter. Yeah. So let's talk about the scoring. So firstly, it is a detection-based test. We found that a lot of anti-scam products don't necessarily completely block threats. It's more they'll provide advice, essentially. So it may be a notification that says, we suspect this is a scam, do not engage with it. And we've based the scoring kind of on how severe of a answer it gives and at what point in the attack it actually gives that response, essentially. So for safe emails, obviously, ideally, we don't want it to say anything. So they get 4 points for that. For your short messages, if it highlights that it's a scam straight away, then that's great. You get full marks. For medium sort of length of attack, so this is like 3 to 4 back and forth messages. If it only provides caution early, then they get sort of 2 points. If it only provides caution late, then it's only 1 point. Because the way we've designed the kind of longer attacks is that it slowly builds up to the final message, but they're overtly suspicious leading up to the kind of final attack. The scoring's based on what stage of the attack the detection was made and what were the product's recommendations. So obviously if it's Elon Musk messaging someone saying they want to give them £5,000, the product should be able to say, maybe don't give them the money. It should have quite an obvious, do not engage with this person. With the medium and long messages, they are scored in the same way, even though we kind of define them differently. We've separated them because we think it's useful data for vendors to see at what point their product kind of steps in, and it's easier to process on the spreadsheet when it's defined this way, because this is how we build the samples. So let's talk about the pilot that was around earlier in the year. So infrastructure. For the pilot, we did go for quite a smaller infrastructure just to like get everything working and make sure it's running effectively. So we went for 1 victim phone, 1 victim Gmail account, 5 attacker SMS senders, 11 attacker email addresses, 1 FP SMS sender, and 3 FP email senders. So the pilot, it ran successfully. The product was catching quite a lot of the attacks. Obviously, in terms of FPs, did perfectly, but we did find there was had a bit of a difficulty with some of the SMS threats, which we'll go into a little bit later. The test was hard. I think with the test being mostly text-based samples, we found we had to be very specific about how we were creating the samples, especially in the SMS side. So there are a lot of text that I might think, if I saw that on my phone, like, oh yeah, that's obviously a scam. But it has to have something that's kind of actionable, and it has to be quite obviously a scam in this sort of context. The pilot did show what kind of language triggers sort of anti-scam protection. So this is where we kind of developed our samples to make sure it's including those elements. So post-pilot feedback. Some samples did need changing. Like I was just saying, some of the samples were not obviously malicious. As I mentioned earlier, the language needed to be very specific to be considered a scam, and samples which ended with a potential for further communication didn't quite fit that criteria, even if they seemed suspicious from my perspective. So obviously, if someone believes that a particular contact is legitimate, there is the potential for them to set up scams later. But for an anti-scam detection, that person would need to have asked for something specific. The distribution of samples was not reflective of kind of real world data. I will say for the pilot, we did use a different a distribution that was shown kind of early in the presentation. And we've now based our samples on data that we've found. Another big thing, obviously, it was quite a small test in terms of the infrastructure, so more phone numbers. As always, with these types of tests, the more senders you can get, the better. Using a smaller amount of numbers meant that over time, relationships did start to develop kind of between the particular contacts, which could have potentially affected how trusted they were considered by the anti-scam tool. Another big one is that Gmail was getting in the way. So we found that Gmail's own email security was marking messages as malicious and putting them in the spam folder. In fact, for the email side, it did mark 44% of the email samples as malicious, but 32% of the ones that did get through were blocked. What we initially did was we gave these emails, these particular samples, half scores for them because we felt it was a bit unfair to completely penalise a product because they didn't have a chance to look at it. But in future, I think we were a bit too harsh. So in this initial run, it was changed to give the product a full score, but in the final test, it'd be a case of the samples that got picked up by Gmail would just be taken away from the corpus. So, the future. Obviously, with scam testing, the scope is huge. We're already experimenting with different tools to make the samples more intricate and more interesting. We're open to including scenarios that utilize deepfakes, phishing, which is QR code phishing, SMS phishing campaigns, and so on and so forth. Obviously, with the way scams develop in the wild, we want to do exactly what attackers do. So we're open to quite a lot.